You have found your favorite hockey podcast. This is Wooden Sticks. I am the host, Kevin Gorg, and I'm looking forward to another great conversation today as we feature one of the great broadcasters in our market here in the Twin Cities, and that is Alexis Pearson. Hails from the great hockey town of South St. Paul. Went to college at St. Cloud State University. So many broadcasters out there. Went through that great program there. And she works with the Minnesota Wild Radio Network, has for years, and really blown up in the last couple of years covering women's hockey, and specifically now with the PWHL and Minnesota's run to the Walter Cup Championship. She's just got this energetic, bubbly personality, and with that comes the great talent, the great knowledge of the game. And I've known Alexis since she was a student at St. Cloud State. I actually got to meet her family. Tom Reed and I were doing a charity event over at the Children's Hospital in St. Paul. And at this charity event, I think Ryan Carter at the time was a player for the Minnesota Wild. And we were just, over there seeing some of the patients. They were opening up a new wing in one of their spots there for the kids where they could have kind of a sports theme. And the Wild had brought over a bubble hockey thing, and they were doing all kinds of fun little tournaments with some of the patients there at Children's. And Alexis and her family were there. Now, her sister had been a patient there when she was a youngster, and actually had some life-threatening situations on the medical side. And so I got to meet Alexis and her family at this event. And at one point, I talked to both Alexis and her dad about the fact that she was going into broadcasting. And at the time, I think she was halfway through her college years at St. Cloud State. So she probably just finished her sophomore year. And so her dad asked if I'd be willing to be kind of a mentor. And I said, absolutely. And so we struck up a great mentor/friendship thing right away that following year. And so we'd get together for coffee. I'd have her job shadow me. And eventually I figured out, well, this kid's got so much talent. She's so outgoing and fun to be around. I was at the time selling a tip sheet at Canterbury Park. And so I recruited her to be one of my ace tip sheet sellers. And she was unbelievable. Like she broke records. I'm not kidding, selling these tip sheets. And it was really fun to kind of get to know her away from the rink and have more time with her in the summer to talk about broadcasting, how things were going at St. Cloud State. And I knew, when you work in this business as long as I have, I knew right away this kid had the it factor. And so it's been really so much fun for me to watch her finish up at St. Cloud State, dip her toes in the water, and then have this unbelievable success. And you can find her on the Power Trip Morning Show with the guys on KFan. You can see her around the rink almost every home game with the Minnesota Wild, and now just seeing her as play-by-play, as analyst, and now reporter with the PWHL. I mean, she's just remarkable what she does, and I think we're just getting started here. I really believe that. She's just a tremendous human being. She's got all kinds of talent, and I thought it was a really good time for me to connect back with Alexis and reflect on this unbelievable season that we just watched in women's hockey. And, I coached for 10 years. I think people know the byline for me from 1998 to 2007. I was the head coach at the University of St. Thomas. And so when I got hired to be the first coach in program history, it was a different world. I mean, girls high school hockey had come a pretty good ways, and we had superstars, no doubt about it. From Natalie Darwitz to the Curtin sisters to Chrissy Wendell, and the names, right? And it was in a good spot, and then it needed to get to a great spot. And I think in my 10 years as a college coach, I got to watch the game at the high school level really transform and the depth of talent really take off. And so when I look at this season, I look at it from a different lens. I mean, I really believe that this specific season, when they finally figured out how to condense all the best players in the game into one league and to find the right markets, I mean, hockey-loving markets like Toronto and Boston and Montreal and Minnesota, this is how you grow the game. And I can't wait to talk to Alexis about attending one of the games in that championship series. It was game 3, and went down there on a Friday night, on a night where the Twins and Timberwolves were playing home games. Timberwolves in this magical playoff run they were having. There was nearly 10,000 people in St. Paul to watch this PWHL game, and it was unbelievable. The atmosphere, the excitement, the kids in the crowd. This is something, and Alexis has been a huge part of this, so it'll be great to get her perspective on that. Like me, she's a huge fan of the Minnesota Wild, and I think dreams, like we all do, of one day, marching down West 7th in that Stanley Cup parade. And she's got a keen insight to the game. She's there, and she works every game, and she sees different things. I'm going to pick her brain a little bit on what went wrong last year and maybe where this thing can go in the years to come. And I'm going to put her on the spot at some point today, and we're going to find out which team here in this market on the men's side, Twins, Wild, Wolves, or Vikings, gets the next championship. That'll be a part of our hat trick hot seat. Bottom line is, super excited to have Alexis Pearson join the show, and she will in just a couple of minutes. So, folks, when you think about the Freemasons, I think a lot of times you're probably thinking about those secret handshakes and the unusual hats, which are great. But, of course, there's those pancake breakfasts, which I've been a part of, and they're pretty spectacular, too. Minnesota Masonic Charities, though, would prefer that you think about the work that they do here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the U of M and the Masonic Children's Hospital, along with the home over in Bloomington. These are just a few examples of the important work that Freemasons support right here in the great state of Minnesota. As a part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. So happy that they've joined us here on Wooden Sticks to be a part of the show and help spread that word. And we look forward to learning all kinds of great things in the weeks to come from Minnesota Masons. Now, it's summer officially. It's hot and sticky, and I love it. I love the change of seasons. It's one of my favorite aspects of living here in Minnesota. And if you're here in the summertime, why wouldn't you get on the water? It's one of the most spectacular parts of Minnesota, right? We've got those 10,000 lakes. Why don't you do it too? Why don't you be a part of something where you can get on the water on a regular basis with no hassle, no stress, no learning new skills, no working and cleaning and doing all the things behind the scene that make boating go? It's Beta Bay Boat Club. What they offer is a country club boating experience. You show up, you sign in, and you're on the water within 5 minutes. Same thing when you get done. Wrap it up, check out. They do the cleaning, they gas the boat, they maintain the boat. And they've got 24 years of experience on Lake Minnetonka. Be a part of it. It's beautiful. It's summer. It'll be a great new family tradition for you. Call them at 952-401-3880 or check them out at betabayboatclub.com. When we come back on Wooden Sticks, we get to hear all about that Walter Cup championship from somebody who was there every step of the way. Alexis Pearson next, right here on the Talk North Pod Network. We're back on Wooden Sticks, and as I mentioned in the intro, super excited for this show today for multiple reasons. A dear friend of mine who I've known for most of her adult life, and she's known for part of mine, being that I'm kind of exactly her dad's age. It's Alexis Pearson. She needs no introduction. She's all over the place, from the Power Trip morning show on K-Fan to all over the PWHL to the Minnesota Wild Radio Network, and formerly for all of us out of Canterbury Park. It's great to have you on the show.
KG, I'm so happy to be here. I was so happy to get your text, and I'm always excited to talk hockey, so I'll say yes to any opportunity to do that.
Well, and that's the thing I want to start with. Here on Wooden Sticks, we like to go back to where it all began. And I just, I want to go back to when you were a little baby, when you were just a little youngster. And I get it. South St. Paul is a hockey hotbed. Mm-hmm. Doug Wugarina, formerly known as Wakota. Anybody that lives in the shadows of that barn probably is drawn to the game of hockey. But you're crazy about the game of hockey. Where did it all start?
I got it from my dad. And the most frequently asked question that I get as a hockey broadcaster is, oh, you must have played. Where'd you play? How good were you? What position? And I'm always a little embarrassed to admit that I never actually played the sport of hockey. I grew up skating like every Minnesotan does, but I never played organized hockey. I never played high school hockey. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't have been any good because I wasn't good at any of the sports I played. So I just stuck to watching sports, and hockey was always my dad's favorite sport. So we always had the Wild on at home. And I quickly grew to love watching the Wild and talking about the Wild. And when I was a kid, I really didn't love any other sport. It wasn't until I was an adult that I grew a love for all the other great teams here in the state of Minnesota. But when I was a kid, it was hockey 24/7. I wanted to go to the games. I wanted to watch the games. And pretty quickly on, I realized that I wanted to do something related to hockey as a career. And I figured, well, I talk a lot. I love watching the game. Might as well find a job where that's what I do all the time. So it started with a love for watching it and turned into a love for talking about it.
And I think you need to take it as a compliment because you've already in your young career worn a lot of different hats. You've
Mhm.
been a reporter like I am with the Minnesota Wild. You've been an analyst in the booth on radio and TV. You've done play by play. And I think people assume that you played and or coached the game because you're so knowledgeable. I'll give you an example. John Stroh is our longtime
Mhm.
producer at Valley Sports North for Wild Hockey. He's been there since day one. He's one of the best at what he does in the league. In fact, he was brought in for some work during the playoffs by some of the national outlets. John Stroh is very critical, and he's great at his job, but he'll push you to be better because he doesn't pull punches. And he had a chance to watch you do some of your work this year with the PWHL, and he doesn't rave about anybody, and he raved about you. And so I think that's a compliment when people get to see you do your work. They just assume you've been around the game at the highest level as a player because of your wealth of knowledge. And your knowledge comes from years of being around the game and now broadcasting the game. And I think that's a big time compliment to your wealth of knowledge. So let's take it all the way full circle to your latest endeavor with the Minnesota team in the PWHL. This was, from afar, as I watched you guys, a magical season. What was it like to be behind the ropes and a part of it?
I think magical is probably the best word you could have picked to describe it, because it seems like every time I try to explain it to people, there's no words that adequately explain what it felt like to watch the season unfold and also to be a part of it, from the broadcast side of things, and just to kind of see it from behind the scenes from the get-go, right? I got the emails when they said, hey, we're doing something here. And then I watched the teams get put together. And then I watched the emails come through of, hey, we're trying to put together a broadcast team. And so as everything unfolded from the summer, last summer, to the point where we got to game one, to the point where we got to raising up the Walter Cup and doing that broadcast, it's been incredible to watch the whole season unfold and to see what everybody did behind the scenes, because everyone watching at home saw what we did on TV, right? And you saw the game and you saw the product, but you didn't get to witness what went on behind the scenes and all the work that went into making the season happen. It is honestly incredible that it went as well as it did, because it's tough to start something new like this and to get people on board right away and to sell tickets and to get people to watch on TV. And they did all of that. They crushed it. I mean, the numbers were great in every aspect. And I can't believe we're already through season one. And I mean, the best part of it all is the product. The on ice product is incredible. It's the best you're going to see. And so that has been the most fun part, is watching these women who for the longest time have been split up among different leagues, playing overseas, playing in the Olympics, playing in all the different leagues they've had for women. Now we're all together. So you go to one place to watch the best product. And that to me is the coolest part of it all.
And Minnesota's a really hard market to make inroads in, because there is so much other hockey, from the Wild to both the men and women on the Gophers side, to high school hockey, to youth hockey. Day one, though, and I look back at the first home game, Alexis, for Minnesota in the PWHL with that attendance record. How were you guys able to cultivate your own spot on the landscape, not just as the team was good and the team went on this unbelievable run during the playoffs, but from day one? How has this organization been able to be so good at bringing people to their building?
Well, I think the first thing is Minnesotans love hockey. You'll watch any hockey you can get, whether it's high school. We get big crowds for high school. You get big crowds for college. You get big crowds for the Wild. You get big crowds for everything here as far as hockey is concerned. So I knew that people would flock to the women's team like they do for every other element of hockey here in Minnesota. So I had faith that we would draw a crowd. But what I didn't know was how consistently and how big right off the get-go we were going to be able to draw a crowd. And as we were leading up to that first game, we were so focused on the broadcast side of just getting our ducks in a row and making sure we were ready to go for day one. And by the time we got close to that first game, I was getting texts and stuff about the crowd, and it just the number kept going up. I'm like, wow, we're really going to pack the stands. I mean, this is going to be a big crowd for day one. And I still didn't fully believe it until we got into the arena and people started flooding in, and they finally announced that attendance number. And at the time, we broke the record for highest attendance for a U.S. women's hockey game in that first game. So that might be the most incredible moment of my career so far, was being at that rink for that game. Just knowing that we broke the record, that we were like on the precipice of something big, because at the time we didn't know how the season was going to go, but it felt good, right? We saw the crowd. We saw Minnesota won that first game. It felt like something special was happening, and not knowing yet what was waiting for us, I think was part of the fun of like, wow, like this is really happening. Like we're really here. There's people in the stands. There's players on the ice. We're broadcasting this game to an audience who's watching at home. And it was one of the most special things. And then throughout the rest of the season, fans kept coming, whether it was Wednesday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, whether the Vikings were playing or the Wild were playing on the road, people kept coming. And whether they were at the rink or tuning in at home, it was incredible. And I've said it from day one up until that last game. The fans deserve so much credit for helping make this season what it was. And especially being here in Minnesota and watching what the fans did, I thank them so much for being a part of this with us, because at the end of the day, you know, this is for the fans, right? This product is for the fans. The broadcasts are for the fans. So knowing people are watching and appreciating means a lot.
I got to tell you, game 3 of the Walter Cup playoff against Boston, Chrissy and I went down last second, right? We were looking for something to do. We were going to head to dinner with another couple. Those plans fell through, and we got there literally at 6:05 as the puck was being dropped, not really knowing what to expect. And it was, it blew me away. Like it was one of those nights where I left the rink with the biggest smile on my face. And for those that maybe haven't been to a game, I got to tell you, what I was struck by, Alexis, is not only the crowd, and this was a night when the Timberwolves were playing. And so the Timberwolves were home, the Twins were home.
Playing at the same time.
At the exact same time. And I'm thinking, I told Chrissy, I'm like, man, if they get 5,000 people tonight, that'd be really pretty cool. And it's nearly double that when I get there. But then to see the crowd, to see the gear, and what struck me the most is how many young girls were in that crowd, wide-eyed, just like I was as a kid watching the North Stars, and then the Minnesota chants nonstop the entire game. There was, and I don't want anyone with the Minnesota Wild to take this the wrong way, because it's a different crowd and it's a different setting, because they've been around now for 24 years. But we both looked at each other and said, the atmosphere in this building right now might outdo any Wild game we've ever seen. And that was from the start of the game all the way through the end of the game. And I guess for you to see that many young girls in the crowd, knowing, you know, these women now are going to be big time role models for years and years to come. Knowing you're a big part of this whole production, it's got to make you feel pretty proud.
Well, KG, as you know, as somebody who, you know, grew up watching the sport and you played the sport, right? Going to games, watching games, and now working in the industry. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to say when I was a kid, you didn't have this. You looked up to the men hockey players. You had maybe some really good Olympians who you could watch every few years or so, but you couldn't just say, hey, I'm going to go to a women's hockey game today, right? Like you didn't have that luxury. You didn't have those role models. My favorite hockey players growing up were all Minnesota Wild players. They were all men's players. And it's crazy to think that I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to say that. And the generation of kids now and my kids someday are not going to ever have that same experience. They will now have both women and men to look up to in the sport and say, I love that player. That's my favorite player. And to me, that is one of the coolest things of what's happening right now in the world of women's hockey, is that we are really in a shift right now, and life for those young girls and boys in the crowd are not the same life we lived when we were young hockey fans watching and adoring the sport. And that game you went to, you picked the fun one to go to because they got shut out and lost in that next game, game 4 at home. But that game 4, when the goal Minnesota scored was overturned and Boston ends up going and scoring moments later to win it, our production crew showed some shots of the crowd. And one of the shots was of a young boy sobbing.
I saw it.
So now my first thought is, that poor boy, I've been there a million times. I would still be that person today at age 28 if I was in the crowd. But my second thought was, that is so cool that a young boy is sobbing over this game, because even, you know, as I got older, it was the people who liked women's hockey were women. That was it, right? Men didn't love it as much. Now it's like you see men in the crowd, you see middle-aged men, you see young men, you see men my age, you see all kinds of groups of people. And that boy sobbing, as sad as it was for me to see that and know his night has just been ruined by what he watched, it was a cool feeling to know there's young boys out there as well that love this team and love the sport of women's hockey just as much as the women do. So it has been really cool to be at those ranks, watch those crowds, watch all the signs, the kids with their signs, how much they love the team, their favorite players, saying they want to be them someday. It's unlike anything else. And it's unlike anything we've ever seen either.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make, because walking around that building, we saw all different ages and different, again, boys, girls. But I mean, what struck me was just the enthusiasm that crowd had. So put your analyst hat on now, because Minnesota was one of the best teams throughout most of the regular season. And what's so remarkable about their playoff run is they were bad in the final couple weeks of the regular season.
Yeah.
In your eyes, what happened at the tail end of the regular season, and how did they overcome that, maybe flip the switch and place the wall in the playoffs?
To be honest, KG, I still don't really know. I mean, I've watched so many hockey games in my life. I've seen so many playoff runs, playoff losses, playoff triumphs. I've seen it all, right? As have you. We've seen the worst of it. We've seen some of the best of it. And you kind of get these trends throughout a season, right? A team has slumps and then they have their highs, and there's usually reasons for both of those. And Minnesota, for most of the season, were battling for that first spot in the league. They were in it for much of it. If they weren't in it, they were right in that second spot, trying to get back into first. So they didn't spend much of the season outside of one of those top two spots. And then we had the international break that was a few weeks long, and we all knew this would be a big talking point. How our team's going to respond when they come back from this break? Is it going to do them good? Is it going to do them bad? And Minnesota comes out of that break and loses every game before the playoffs, all 5 of them. And not only do they lose them, they look really, really bad doing it. Like, it's not like, oh, you barely lost by a goal. It was a 4-3, good old game, and you just snuck out on the wrong side of it. No, it was like they couldn't score. They weren't getting the goaltending. Everything they were doing well to start the season flew out the window when they came back from that break. And all of a sudden, that playoff spot that was just about secured before the break was like, they might not even make the playoffs now. Oof. For about 4 straight games, they just needed a point, and they lost all of them in regulation. They didn't get a single point down the stretch. So it was crazy to think like, okay, well, they were first looking like they were maybe going to be one of the teams that could win the Walter Cup. Now all of a sudden, we don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs. Well, by the skin of their teeth, they make it into the playoffs on the very, very last day of the season. And sure enough, Toronto picks them to be their opponent in that first round. Now, Toronto was a great team all season long, one of the best teams. They took a lot of names and numbers, every single day of that season, and Minnesota fell victim to them several times in the season. And it just felt like they weren't going to be able to beat them. I was a non-believer as well. I looked at that series thinking, I don't know how this team finds a way to win this. I don't even know if they win a game at this point, right, because they're playing so poorly. And then they go down 2-0 and I'm thinking, all right, well, I'm not right often, but I might be right about this. And it looks like their season is done. Then they rattle off 1 win, and I think, okay, sure, it's hard to sweep a team. They got their win. Toronto will come back and they'll beat them in game 4. Then all of a sudden they win that second game. Now it's, once you get to that game 5 or that game 7, right? It's new series. Doesn't matter what happened. Anybody's got a chance now. And Minnesota plays hard in that game 5. Taylor Heisey shows up and shows us who she's been for so much of that season and gets some big goals for Minnesota. And Toronto kind of looked defeated. And Minnesota comes out, wins that game, and gets a chance to play for the Walter Cup. So I don't know. To me, it seemed like a mental thing, right? And in sports, when you get into that mental rut, it is tough to get out, regardless of the talent you have as a team or as an individual player. So much of it is a mental game. And I feel like Minnesota was just in one of those mental ruts where they were starting to maybe doubt themselves and thinking, okay, what are we doing wrong? And at the end of that series, Taylor Heisey said, nobody believed us but us. Nobody believed in us but us. And I remember watching that interview thinking, yep, that I didn't think this could be done. She's talking to me. She's talking to all of us watching at home. And I think they just, once they got that first win against Toronto, I think they realized we can do this. We are a good enough team to do this. We've got the skill. They weren't dealing with any big injuries. They had a chance to do what we've seen them do so many times this season. And once that first win came, it was a whole new series for Minnesota, and I think they just kept their foot on the gas and found a way to get the job done.
I'm glad you brought up Taylor Heisey, because I think most Minnesota hockey fans recognize the name, know the talent, and she had just a tremendous year, and she's had many good years of hockey. But you're there, and you get to see her at all different spots, kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. what makes her tick? What makes her go and allows her to be such a dominant player on the ice? Because there's got to be something off the ice that separates her. She just seems remarkable.
To me, she holds herself to a high standard. And I think she holds her teammates to a high standard. And I think a player like her understands her talent. She's aware that she is a very skilled player, and she expects herself to perform at that level all the time. One of the things that impresses me the most about Taylor Heise is she is one of the best interviewers I have ever interviewed in all my life of broadcasting, which is now,
Wow.
I've got enough years under my belt to say that I've interviewed a lot of athletes, and she is just so aware of the situation at hand. She's honest with the task at hand, whether things are going well or things are going poorly. She knows what needs to be done to either win that game or find a way to come back and win that game. And I think that attitude she has off the ice is apparent in the way she plays the game as well. She doesn't get too flustered. She doesn't get too far ahead of herself. She just is so focused on the task at hand that she's able to use that to her advantage on the ice. And we've seen many times this season where players have gone after Heise, knowing that if we can get her off her game, we might be able to win this game against Minnesota because she's one of their strongest assets, both as a vocal leader and as a physical, talent that she has. And we saw it especially in the playoffs, many games where we're like, they're going after Heise. They're trying to get her off her game. They're trying to play her physical and see if they can shake her. And for the most part this season, she did a great job of not letting that get to her and just playing the skilled game we know that she can play. And to top it all off, she's fast as heck. I mean, that girl can fly. She's so smart. She knows where she needs to be on the ice. And, when she shoots, it's like, yep, that's a Taylor Heise shot. I mean, she just rips it. And I've been so impressed watching her. And, of course, she won the playoff MVP for Minnesota after turning it on in Game 5 against Toronto. She really took it from there and was tallying points in just about every game. So she is an impressive talent, and Minnesota fans are lucky they get to watch her night after night.
No question. Well stated. So where do we go from here? I look at the league now. The markets that the PWHL is in are great hockey markets. I look at Boston, Montreal, New York, obviously Minnesota. We've talked about it. Is there expansion? Is it going to be a couple years down the road? Are they going to at some point move to a different season like the WNBA? Where do you see this going to? Because the bar was set awfully high here in year one.
Yeah, I know as of right now, there will be no new teams for next year. I'm not sure what their plan is after that as far as introducing new teams. I know there is a great demand for it because it's one of the questions I get asked the most about the league is, hey, when are they going to put a city or a team in Detroit? When are they going to put a team in Seattle, right? Like there's fans out there that want a team in their city. And I've been asked it many times, when are they going to do it? I know it's not happening next year. Of course, they've got a lot still to figure out. They need to do the names and the logos, and there's a lot they're still trying to sort through with the 6 teams they do have that I don't think it's a high priority for them at this point. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 3 or 4 years there's new teams on the market just because of the demand of it. And if every season is as successful and as prosperous as this one was, as far as the attention and the love that this league has been shown, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring new teams in. So I know that is on the radar, but not happening next year. I know that names and logos will be announced in August. So teams will finally have names, which KG, let me tell you, as a broadcaster,
That's
not having
tough.
the team name is, how many times I said the Minnesota waiting to fill it in with the mascot. And I just, would get stuck halfway through my sentence. Like, where do I go from here? So I'm thankful as a broadcaster, we're getting names for these teams.
Well, they did it the right way. They didn't rush into it. They're going to have branding that's going to be a part of this. I have what I think is a really good idea. And of course, I'm 57, so I might not be as hip as the rest of you. But in my mind, I have a great idea for their new name for Minnesota. I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll get to mine. And maybe we'll cross over and have the same idea.
Okay, so I've seen some rumblings of some names that fans like and all that stuff. My personal favorite, and there's a lot of good ones out there, my personal favorite is the Minnesota Superior. The reason I like that name is the Great Lakes, right? You've got Lake Superior, but also the double meaning of superior. Like we're superior than you, we're a better team than you. So I like the double meaning of like indicating you're a really good team while also paying homage to some of what Minnesota is known for. So that one is my personal favorite. There was another one, I can't remember it now. Something to do with the color purple.
But Purple Rain. That's Purple the one. Rain.
Yes, is
That's the
that the one
one.
you like?
That's my very favorite. So obviously you
Okay,
spell rain the right way. It's
correct.
REIGN.
Yen.
But then you have the Prince tie-in to
Yes.
Minnesota. The purple is obvious with the
Mhm.
team colors. And then you kick it back to, I don't know how many Wild fans remember this, but the year or two after Prince unfortunately passed away, they used Let's Go Crazy as their
Mhm.
goal song. And I really enjoyed that. Now, if you're the Minnesota Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy can be your goal song. And after a win, they can leave the ice to Purple Rain with the sticks up and the whole thing. I
Oh.
love it.
I didn't think of tying in the Let's Go Crazy, but that is really great. And yeah, I like, Prince is such an iconic figure here for Minnesotans. And on top of that, he's just a tremendous talent and fantastic singer, and his songs are all memorable songs, right? Everybody knows a Prince song, right? So it's
Yes.
something that stands the test of time, and 50 years from now, people would recognize and love that name just as much as we do now in 2024. So I think those are my top two. I really like. There was a lot of good names out there that were intriguing to me, but I think those are my top two.
All right, before we segue to the Minnesota Wild, I can't wait to pick your brain and get some thoughts on not just last season, but where this thing is going. Like me, you've worn a lot of different hats. I've done a little play-by-play. I've been an analyst in the booth, and I've been a reporter for most of my time covering this hockey team now for nearly 2 decades. You've done all three as well.
Mhm.
Of those three, if you're working a hockey game, which one is the biggest challenge? Which is the most comfortable? And which do you prefer? And maybe they're all the same. I
Ooh.
don't know.
I love this question because I think it gives people an inside look to our jobs, right? Because you see us on TV, you hear our voices, but I don't think people always understand what makes the broadcaster tick and kind of what goes into the preparation for a game
Yes.
or a season, which is a lot, as you know, KG. Many hours spent on the laptop with your pens and pencils and getting things sorted out so that you're ready to go. Most of my career, I've done game analyst or color commentator. The names are used interchangeably. But I've also done a handful of play-by-play, especially at the high school level. I do actually mostly play-by-play. And then at the pro level, I've done mostly color commentator. I like both for different reasons, but if I had to pick one to do for the rest of my life, funny enough, I would pick play-by-play. The reason that I like play-by-play a little bit more, and this is how I always describe it to people, is when you think of the greatest moments in sports history, whose voice in
Yes.
the broadcast booth do you remember? You remember the play-by-play person, right?
Yep.
Minneapolis Miracle, you think Paul Allen, right? The 1980 Olympic team, you think Al Michaels, right? You think of that person who brought you that
Great
moment,
point.
which is the play-by-play person. And I've always loved the thought of being that voice in someone's head when they think back on their favorite sports moments of like, man, that broadcaster, their call was so awesome, or it was so exciting, right? So I like that idea of being that person for somebody, especially as somebody who as a kid idolized the broadcasters myself and remembered all those big calls and those big moments. Now, the game analyst part of it, I love the analytical side of sports and breaking down why a certain thing happened the way it did, or why that was a good idea, or why that was a bad idea. And I like that side of it, of kind of being that voice that, you hear the play and then you hear what the play was and why it went the way it did. So I like that side of it. I do think that game analyst, funny enough, is the tougher of the two because you're following the lead of the play-by-play person. The play-by-play person kind of runs the show, right? They bring you the pace, they bring you the tone. And as the color commentator, you kind of wait for their cue to jump in, and you have to wait for the pauses, and you have to be ready to say something at all times because you never know when the play is going to stop or they're going to throw it to you and ask you to comment, fill in the blanks on something. Play-by-play, you're just saying what you see. And as long as you can talk fast enough, which trust me, I can, I get told that a lot. I think play-by-play is a little bit of a smoother process just because you're just saying what you see. As long as you understand the sport well and you can keep up with the cadence of the game, I believe that one is a little bit more manageable. Game analyst, there's a lot more, and you just never know what stats you're going to need to pull out of your hat, right? So you kind of have to be ready for everything. And so that one takes a lot more prep, in my opinion, to be ready to be a game analyst.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm probably most comfortable because I've done it the longest doing the interviews. I love being the analyst in the booth once in a while, or being between the benches and being allowed to be maybe that second analyst with a different sight line. I freak out though with the play-by-play. And I just haven't done it a lot. I really haven't.
Yeah.
I've done maybe 20 to 25 games play-by-play in my life, whereas, I've done hundreds and hundreds the other way. So what freaks me out is, I always want to make sure that I'm getting it right.
Yes.
And so I don't ever get to the point, and I'm sure for people that do it on a regular basis, I've talked to LaPanta about this, who does all our wild games, you get to a point where it's second nature. I haven't got there. As recent as a year ago, I did a Gopher men's game against North Dakota, and I literally never had a chance to really relax and enjoy the game. The games were great, but I was just making sure that I had the numbers right, the names right. I kind of hopped in there. I hadn't been watching these teams on a regular basis. It was very stressful. It's kind of like when I fill in for Paul Allen calling the races at Canterbury. I enjoy it when it's done, and I look forward to the opportunity, but I'm freaking out the entire time, making sure that I don't screw it up. And that's just part of the job, right? That's just how you do it. So you and I both love the Minnesota Wild. We both cherish our time at the rink. And for folks that don't know, Alexis works with the Minnesota Wild Radio Network, along with Kevin Fallness and Joe O'Donnell and Tom Reed and all those great people. And I think we both hope that at some point we get to see this whole thing, from day one. We've been fans, right? You were a little kid. I was coming off this broken heart time when we had our team taken away to Dallas, but we want to see the Cup come to Minnesota. And so take a look at last year. Tell me from your eyes what you liked, what you didn't like, and then maybe where's this thing going?
I mean, man, this past season was one of the toughest seasons as a Wild fan I've ever experienced, and one of the most unique seasons as a Wild fan I've ever experienced. For those who've been following me for a while, people know that my dad is my best friend, and we talk sports nonstop, probably more than anything. Every other conversation is, I would say, it's 90% sports, and then 10% is financial advice because he's an accountant. But yeah, so we're talking sports all the time, and every time I leave work from a Wild game, I'll call him on the phone because he wants to make sure I get to my car safely. So during that time, we break down the game. We talk about what we liked, what we didn't. And I said to my dad several times on the phone this year after a game, I don't even know how to feel, because it was one of those seasons where for so long it felt like it was hopeless and there was no chance, we were going to even make the playoffs, let alone make a playoff run if we got there. Then at times they'd show us a little glimmer of hope of like, okay, this team's not that bad. They're putting up a good fight. They're beating some okay teams. And, especially after Dean was fired and we get a new coach in there, they started playing some really good hockey. Then they had another push kind of late in the season, right when it mattered the most. And they were just about to be out for the count. They had more life in them. And so they kind of just yanked you around the season, where it was every other day I had a different feeling on the team. And I'm sure, you being around the players and the staff more than I am, KG, I'm sure you felt the same way, right? I mean, it just felt like there was new emotions every day. I think for me, one of the tougher things of this season was, of course, the last couple of years, they've been so good, right? They broke so many personal records the last couple of years, so many team records. We've started to see Kirill Kaprizov kind of shine and fit into his role in this team now that he's been here for a couple of years. And this year, they took a step back from that, which is always going to draw the attention of fans and say, well, we did this last year and we were this much better last year. But on top of that, they took even one further step, back from that. And not that it's an excuse, because every team goes through it, but they also dealt with a lot of injuries, and a lot of injuries that were long-term and to important players. And it just seemed they were never fully healthy for that long. They constantly were having young guys up in the lineup. The lineups were getting mixed around and mishmatched, and there was different lines every night. And that was a big part of it to me, as well, as they just never fully seemed gelled together. And that's tough for any team to try to go through that. And the other big thing for me, and I hate to say it because I love him, but Gus Bus took a big step back this year. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges for the Wild, especially early on in the season. And Marc-Andre Fleury's great, but he can't play 60 games anymore. And you need Gus Bus to be able to fill those gaps and to be your starting goaltender and play like a starting goaltender and win like a starting goaltender. And he started off the season really strong in game one. And then after that, it was like, where'd Gus go? I mean, he just wasn't that goalie that we saw last year that helped us win so many big games. So I think between injuries, a little step back in goaltending, goaltending. I think those were some of the big issues for the Wild. And of course, it's tough to go through a coaching change mid-season, especially so early on in the season like that, when you still have so many games left to play and so much potential still, right? There's still a chance you make the playoffs. You're still trying to turn your season around. It's not like when your coach gets fired in March, right? And the season's done already. So I just felt like they weren't a strong enough team this year to overcome some of those challenges. And even when they showed life, they never won those big games we needed them to late in the season to ultimately get them into the playoffs.
And I'm with you. It felt, I think, because of the injuries, because of the coaching change, and because of the trip to Sweden, it felt like 2 seasons. I mean, it just felt
trip to Sweden,
so arduous. It was the longest of long seasons we've had. And I think if you look at it pragmatically and you factor in the types of players they were missing, I think it's fairly easy to look at next year and say they put those big numbers up, and it was probably a little bit above what was expected from some of the players they had. Mm-hmm. But now you add Brock Faber into the mix, and he's a year removed now from that rookie season where we know who he is. Like he is a stud defenseman that wasn't there for those 2 great years. And I think if you get the requisite goaltending, this team is back in the playoffs. I think for Wild fans, they're looking for a bounce back, and I think they're looking for this year to be the springboard to the great things a year from now after this next season when the Suter and Parise thing is finally put to bed. I'm so sick of talking about it, so sick of thinking about it. Just go away. Like, it's just too much. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing for me is I look forward to training camp at the end of summer and early fall is, what is Bill Guerin going to do with those goaltenders? Is it, we know it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yep.
And, is it going to be Jesper Wallstedt with him? And we get to see his rookie season kind of unfold, or are we going to see the Gus Bus back and hope that he bounces back to a place that we know he can get to because he was there just a year and change ago? To me, Alexis, that will be the biggest tipping point to success. Not only that decision, but how it plays out once Bill Guerin makes that call.
Well, and I also think one of the brightest spots of this season was how the young guys played, right? Husnadinov, Faber. You got some of these guys that when they were in the lineup, they were noticeable in all the right ways. I was uber impressed with some of them. And it's tough, I imagine, as a young guy to come into a lineup for a team that's been struggling the way they have, fighting for their playoff lives. I can't imagine that's an easy ask to kind of get thrown into that and expect to play well and stand out and do the right things for every game that you're called up for. But so many of the young guys did that this year. And you talk about Brock Faber. Where would this team have been without Brock Faber? Because that blue line was depleted. It was desperate. It was depressing. There was so many words you could use to say how awful at times our blue line was. And we've got some good defensemen, but you don't got Spurgeon in the lineup, who's not only your captain, but your best defenseman, right? You're playing without Matt Dumba for the first time, and that connection him and Jimmy had, you're trying to find a new connection there. Brock Faber was, I think, one of the sole reasons the Wild even had a chance to make the playoffs this year, because of how well he played defensively and at times offensively as well. I mean, he was a savior for many, many games this season.
Yeah, it's exciting. You make a great point, and I think seeing Rossi, Husnadinov, some of these young guys, and even Wallstedt getting a couple of wins late in the season, albeit against subpar teams, doesn't matter. We've seen a little bit now of who this guy can be. I'm telling you, when Wild fans see me out of Canterbury, we always have this conversation, and no BS, like no filter, like I'm not on the air, I'm just talking to these people. This team's a playoff team next year, and within the next 3 or 4 years, they're going to make a cup run. I have no doubt in my mind, and I get it. There are other really good teams in the West, primarily in this division with Colorado and Dallas. It's not going to be easy, but I really like where this team is headed. But now we've come to the final segment here on Wooden Sticks. This is where I get to put you on the hot seat.
Ooh.
It's the hat trick hot seat. These are 3 tough questions. They're not that tough, and there's no real wrong answer. But I want an honest answer from you. And I know you're always from the hip like me. You talk fast, you talk with passion, and that's what I'm looking for here. Okay. So we'll start with this one. Your favorite restaurant in town to go for date night. So it's a date night dinner,
okay,
and you get to pick your very favorite restaurant. Which one you picking?
It's tough because there's a lot of great restaurants in the Twin Cities. We are very lucky. If you're a foodie, you got lots of great choices. But I would say my favorite date night is probably the Ocean Air in downtown Minneapolis.
Oh,
I'm a huge seafood fan. The environment in there is so pleasing. It's so nice. The staff is incredible every time, and the food never misses. So I'd have to say the Ocean Air Seafood Room, one of the best spots in town.
tremendous pick. And Chrissy and I, with all three of the Gore girls on their 16th birthday, took them there. And it is without a doubt one of my very favorite spots in the Twin Cities. Okay.
Yeah.
You probably have less to pick from than a guy my age, but you've been to some concerts. And if you had to pick your all-time favorite concert that you attended, I want to know the band and I want to know the venue.
Oh, okay. It's always a tie between two for me. I used to go to way more concerts when I was younger. I don't go to as many now. But I'll just give you the two best ones that I went to. First one is the Maine at Varsity Theater. They've been around for a very long time, but they're not super mainstream. So some people probably have never heard of them. But the lead singer came into the crowd and was singing right by us. The songs, they played all my favorite songs. It was just one of those concerts where you're like, yes, I've heard every song I want to hear. The crowd was great. So that's one of them. And then my second favorite concert I've ever been to was G-Eazy at Target Center. And that one was just I guess what's the word for it? Like the show itself was just so cool. They had like confetti and they had smoke and they had the last song they played of the night was like his most popular song at the time. And it was just kind of one of those surreal concert moments where you're like, this is so cool to be like singing with all these people here. And so those are my top two concerts I've been to.
I'm going to be brutally honest. I have never heard of Maine or G-Eazy, but
most people
again,
probably heard
I'm
of
30 years older than you.
That's okay, KG. That's okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Now this one's going to be probably the toughest of the three questions.
Okay.
And again, don't worry about offending anybody. This is just your opinion. So it's okay. We just saw a championship for Minnesota in the PWHL. Of the four main sports on the men's side, we've got the Twins, the Wolves, the Vikings, and the Wild. If you had to put a lot of money on this, so it wasn't just throwing it off the wall and hoping you were right. If you had to bet right now, the first of those four teams to win a championship, I want to know which of those four it would be and why you're picking that team.
Oh man, KG. I have this debate with friends all the time, right?
It's a great debate.
It's a great debate. It's unfortunate we have to have it because if our teams were good enough, we'd just have championships every couple years. But this has been an ongoing debate with people of, who's going to be the first to do it. And I feel like I'm ruling out Vikings and Twins. No offense to them. I just think the Wild and the Wolves are closer to that championship than the Vikings and the Twins are. And as the number one Wolves fan as of like 4 years ago, I'm going to have to say, I think the Wolves are the first to do it. Now I get their team's probably going to look a little different next year. They're not going to be able to afford to pay some of the big players that were, so tremendous for us this year. But I just, and I'm going to sound so biased saying this, but I feel like a lot of times it's a tougher path in hockey to get to that championship than it is in the NBA.
No question.
Maybe tougher is the wrong word, but it's very different and it's a different kind of grind. Hockey's a much more physical game. Your body is worn down more by the end of the playoffs than in the NBA, which is, a non-contact sport, all things considered. So I just feel like the Wolves have a greater chance. They seem to have a lot of good pieces right now. And of course, they just made this run to the Western Conference Final. If they take another step forward next year, they're right there at a chance to potentially win it all. So I'm going to say Wolves. I would love to see it. I don't care who does it. I wasn't alive when the Twins won either of their World Series. So if somebody could do it in my lifetime, I'd be thrilled.
And I think if there was a betting board, in all honesty right now, the Wolves would be the betting favorite, which is crazy to think about.
I know.
Because having lived here as long as I have and watched this product, it's amazing, but they really, truly are. And to your point, look no further than Game 6 with Dallas and Edmonton, where Dallas was clearly the better team. And the intangible in hockey is the goaltender. And Skinner for Edmonton was unbelievable. Fine, I lied to you. The hot seat's over, but I have one more question, and I've got to let you go. Who wins the cup? You got Florida, you got Edmonton, you got McDavid, but you've got this unbelievable team that was there last year in the Panthers. Who do you like?
I think Edmonton wins it, and
Oh,
I'm also rooting for Edmonton for two reasons. One, I think Connor McDavid deserves the success and the victory of hoisting that Stanley Cup. He is one of the best talents I've watched in my lifetime, and one of the best who've ever played the game of hockey. So I really want this for him. On the flip side, as you know me, KG, I'm bitter. I'm petty. I don't want the Florida Panthers to mark that championship checkbox off their list before the Wild do. There's not many teams who haven't done it yet, KG, and I don't need that list any smaller than it is with the Wild still on it. So I'm rooting for Edmonton, and it's been so long since they've last won a cup anyway. I don't feel that guilty. There's many people who are fans of that team who haven't seen them win a cup. So I'm going with Edmonton. I'd love to see Connor McDavid do it.
I knew we were going to go over time. I tried to stay on task, and it's too much fun. Thank
you
for doing
that
this.
Of both of us, KG?
There's no chance.
All we do is
I know Brandon's cringing right now because he's got to condense this show to make it fit into the window. I'm going to have to really be efficient with my open and my close. But I've had a blast doing this, Alexis. Congrats on all your great success. I'm not surprised. I met you way back when you were in college, and I knew you were something special way back then. And it's just been for me, it's just been a treat to watch you ascend through the ranks, and then to be a part of that championship this year. I know it had to be a thrill of a lifetime. So I'm so thrilled that you got to have that experience as well.
Thanks, KG. I appreciate you. You know I love you, and it's always nice to see your face and talk hockey.
Great stuff. Alexis Pearson right here on Wooden Sticks. When I come back, we'll close the show, and we'll preview a big show next week with Taylor Huskie. We're back on Wooden Sticks, and as advertised, the energy was there, the love of the game, and the knowledge too. She's the real deal, and she's going places, and I'm really excited to see all the things that she'll do here in her career as a broadcaster. I'm really excited to see where the PWHL is going. I had such a blast at that game, and the Wild are around the gals from Minnesota PWHL because they share those practice facilities. And so a lot of times when we're wrapping up with our practice with the Minnesota Wild, the ladies are getting ready for theirs. They'll come on the ice after the Wild over at Tria Rink more often than not when the Wild are in town. So I've had a chance to visit with some of the gals and just watch some of the hard work behind the scenes. One of the guys that does PR for them is Mr. Fun, Joe Anderson. He's worked on 1500. He's worked on KFAN. He's been on WCCO. He worked with us at Canterbury Park. A dear friend of mine as well. And so to see him in his first year be a part of such a great season, that's pretty cool too. And he was a big part of getting our guest for next week. Taylor Huskie is a superstar in the game of hockey, and homegrown Lake City girl. Just really looking forward to taking this conversation and building off what we started today with Alexis next week when Taylor Huskie joins the show. And she just put the team on her back in stretches this year. And, just listening to Alexis kind of speak to what type of person she is off the ice, the way she carries herself, the leadership part of her game, and then the way she's able to handle all the media stuff. It's going to be a really cool show. And I think it'll be fun for her to take us on that ride to a championship and the emotion that was involved in that. And maybe she'll have an answer for what happened late in the regular season. It was bizarre. I got to tell you, that team was awesome all year long. And then for a 2-week period, as Alexis pointed to, they couldn't do anything right. And we were all watching this from afar going, what the heck is going on? They might not make the playoffs. And then to get it back on track, to dig a 2-0 hole, to rally to beat Toronto in that series after they basically picked you as their opponent, which I think is a really cool aspect of that playoff format. It'll be really interesting to hear some of the thoughts of the star player from Minnesota and the P-Dub. So Walter Cup champions, we celebrate for these next two shows, and that'll be Taylor Huskie next week. And we'd love to have you and some of your friends be a part of the show too. Karen Cleary can get that done. Kay Cleary at talknorth.com. If you know of somebody that's got a business out there, we'd love them to be on the show. Join the Masons, join Beta Bay Boat Club, be a part of Wooden Sticks. And most of all, at the end here, I always like to thank you, the listener, for taking the time to listen to the show, for having that love of hockey like we do here. There's nothing quite like it. And hockey season never ends. We're getting ready for the Stanley Cup. Alexis is going with Edmonton. I'm on the record right now saying that it's Florida in 5. I say it's going to be a short series and the Panthers get it done. Like Alexis, though, I'm cheering for Edmonton. I hope I'm wrong. They just look like a juggernaut to me. The way they manhandled the Rangers, who I thought might have been the best team on paper coming into the playoffs. Florida looks like a team on a mission. If they can stay out of the penalty box and not allow that Edmonton power play to move the needle, I think they're going to be tough to beat. It's going to be great drama. We get to see Connor McDavid, one of the real young superstars in the world of sport, on that big stage, and I don't think he'll disappoint. He'll go out there and make some magic for sure, and that all starts this weekend. So thanks again for listening. This is Wooden Sticks. I'm Kevin Gork. We'll tab you next week, and we're joined by Taylor Heisey.